What I wanted to ask about further was you gave very interesting evidence on the benefits of being out of the single market, the regulatory benefits of being able to do deals with other countries. I wonder if you could expand on that and what the difficulties are that come from regulatory alignment when you're trying to do trade deals with other countries.
Regulatory alignment with the EU?
With the EU.
Well, if the UK wants to reduce its costs of production by deregulating and thereby be able to export more to third countries which are not so fussed, let's say, about the UK's production standards, then moving away from alignment and deregulation is an advantage to the UK in that respect. And the same applies in terms of imports. If the UK is prepared to lower its standards and thereby allow imports from other countries which meet different standards, for instance on production of chickens, to take an example, then that's of benefit to UK consumers.
Different standards are not always lower standards, are they?
No, that's right. You can look at there are two different types of divergences. So one type of divergence is when it's a zero-sum game. The classic example now would be headlights, for instance, for cars. So if the US says, well, your headlights need to be made out of xenon or need to point in this direction, and the EU says, no, it's got to be some other noble gas and point in a slightly different direction, if you're making a car, you've pretty much got to choose. But that's different from standards which often are in the form of quantity. So if you say, well, you can only call this jam if it has 25% fruit, then you're able to meet that standard. And if another standard says it's got to be 50% fruit, then you can meet the first standard by having 50%. You'll also meet the second standard at the same time. So that distinction between zero-sum choice standards and standards where you can actually meet both standards at the same time is fairly important.
And standards can also be used as a trade barrier.
Yes, so you might devise a standard that requires a product to use inputs or a production method which is prevalent in your country, for instance.
So that if we were to maintain regulatory alignment, then the difficulty third countries would face is that their imports to us would still be effectively bound by all the EU standards and all the obstacles to trade that there are from third countries with the EU, and therefore the benefits of free trade and being outside the customs union would be lost to us, and we would be a Norwegian-style rule taker.
Yes, of course, there might still be benefits from having lower duties, if we're talking about a free trade agreement like with the EEA countries. But of course, you're quite right, the benefits of accessing a more deregulated market would disappear because the rules would be the same.
And the biggest advantages potentially come from removing non-tariff rather than tariff barriers, because average EU tariff barriers are actually relatively low even now. And we discussed it actually in relation to Canada last week, and the REACH regulations that the tariffs on chemical products under CETA have gone, but that the chemicals still have to be registered with REACH, which is a big barrier when Canada's got absolutely first world copper-bottomed proper standards, because Canada is a very safe market, and say that REACH becomes a non-tariff barrier to protect EU businesses.
That's absolutely right. You could say the same about SPS standards, health and safety on food, which are often, particularly when it comes to conformity assessment, fairly high, those barriers into the EU. So that's definitely true. I would just balance this, though, by saying that from a third country's point of view, it can actually be an advantage to meet only one set of standards. So if we're talking about the first type of zero-sum game standards, then it may be that the cost-benefit analysis is better to have higher UK standards that meet the EU standards and only have one production line than to have lower UK standards, sell more there, but have two production lines.
But that's a business decision that companies can make, and it's quite interesting that there are some agricultural producers that meet a Walmart standard, because that means they can sell to all the countries Walmart does business in, and they meet all the subsidiary standards as well.